You are standing at the edge of camp when the first snow comes. It is beautiful. You do not notice. Your first thought is arithmetic. Right now, you are warm. A dial on your wall notices the cold before your body does. Winter, for you, is scraping frost off a windshield. For almost all of human history, winter was not weather. It was the season built to end you. And it never came at you from a single direction. It came with 4 weapons. The cold could finish you. The hunger could finish you. The animals could finish you. And the long black nights could wear you down before any of the others got their turn. So here is the question worth asking. For hundreds of thousands of years, with no furnace, no store, no wall that truly stopped the wind, how did anyone get through a winter at all? Because they did. Your ancestors walked straight into the harshest country on the planet and came out the other side. But the shape of how they did it is stranger than a list of clever inventions. These 4 weapons did not arrive separately, and they were not solved separately. Every answer your ancestors found handed them the next problem. And the last problem in that chain had no answer at all, not a tool anyway. Start with the obvious enemy, the cold itself. Here is the part that surprises people. Your body is a tropical machine. We evolved in the warm stretches of Africa and left alone in freezing air. An unprotected human loses fast. Your fingers stop working. Your thinking slows to a crawl. Push your core temperature past a certain point and the whole system simply shuts down. No claws, no thick coat. No real insulation anywhere on you. By any fair measure, we are among the worst designed large animals on Earth for surviving a serious winter. And yet, we did not merely endure the cold. We walked directly into it, north into Ice Age Europe, into Siberia, into places where winter air fell far past what a bare human body can survive. So how? The first answer is fire, and fire is real. But fire has a flaw, and that flaw decides everything that comes after it. Fire heats the side of you facing it. That is all. It does not travel. The moment you step away from the flames to gather more wood, the cold walks straight back in. So fire alone was never going to be enough. What people needed was a way to keep warmth wrapped around the body everywhere the body went. Which brings us to what might be the single most important piece of winter technology our species ever built. Clothing. But not the version you are picturing. For a long time, the assumption was simple. It is cold, so you drape a hide over your shoulders and call it solved. And for a while, that is exactly what people did. But a pelt slung over your back leaves openings everywhere. Wind slips in at the sides. Your arms hang bare. It shifts and drops the moment you move. A draped hide beats nothing. In a real winter, beating nothing still gets you killed. The leap was learning to cut hides into pieces and stitch them back together into shapes that matched a human body. Fitted sleeves, closed seams, a garment that sealed a pocket of warm air against your skin and held it there no matter how you moved. That is the difference between a blanket and a coat. And people were making that difference a very long time ago. Sharpened bone points called awls show up in the record doing exactly this work as far back as 80,000 years. But then something strange happened. Somebody went to enormous trouble to invent a much harder tool. Take a splinter of bone, grind it to a fine point, then bore a hole through it small enough to be delicate, strong enough not to shatter. That is an eye needle, and it is genuinely difficult to make. The earliest ones appear around 40,000 years ago in Siberia. The thread came from the animal too. Sinew, the tough fiber that ties muscle to bone, pulled free and dried. Now here is where the usual telling of this story goes wrong. You will often hear that the needle is what gave us fitted clothing. It is a clean story and it is not quite true. The awls were already doing that job 40,000 years earlier. So why bother with something this hard to produce? The researcher who has looked hardest at this, Ian Gilligan, has an answer that is both technical and slightly funny. Finer sewing means finer garments, layers, something worn against the skin under everything else. His way of putting it is blunt. It comes down to making underwear. Sit with what that means for a second. Take away the needle and the thread, and there is no human population anywhere in a Siberian winter. None. The tailored coat is the technology that let a tropical animal walk out of the warm continent it was built for and take the cold half of the planet. And the moment it worked, it handed your ancestors the next problem. Because now you can move, you can hunt, gather, work in air that should kill you. But the sun still goes down. And when it does, the temperature keeps falling, and no coat on Earth is enough to sleep in. You need somewhere to survive the night. The obvious answer is a cave, and caves genuinely mattered. Deep rock holds a steady temperature, breaks the wind, keeps snow off you. But here is what almost nobody mentions about caves. They are rare. A cave that is dry, defensible, and in a location that makes any sense at all is a genuinely scarce thing. And if you found one, the odds are good that somebody else wanted it too. You could not plan a winter around finding a cave. Most of the time, if you needed a place to survive until spring, you had to build it. And this is where it gets extraordinary. There is a site in central Ukraine called Mezhyrich. The land around it had almost no timber and almost no usable stone. What it had in absurd quantity was mammoth. So that is what they built with. 4 round structures, each between 12 and 24 square meters, assembled from hundreds of mammoth bones and tusks. Jawbones stacked in overlapping rows like roof shingles. Enormous curved tusks arched over the entrances. These were not scraped together in an afternoon. They were engineered, and for decades, archaeologists argued about what they actually were: homes, or bone caches, or ritual monuments, or rubbish heaps that later got read as architecture. Recent radiocarbon work has sharpened both the date and the answer. The dates now land at roughly 18,000 years ago, which is older than the 15,000 figure you will still see quoted in a lot of places. And by dating small animal remains from inside the living layers, instead of the mammoth bones themselves, the team found something better than a date. They found duration. One of those structures appears to have been in use for as long as 429 years. That is what tips it. You do not maintain a ritual bone pile for 4 centuries. You maintain a house. Inside a structure like that, every effort went into trapping heat. Bone does not fit flush against bone. There are gaps everywhere, and every gap is an open door for wind. So people sealed them, layer over layer. Hides stretched across the inner walls and pinned over openings. Blocks of cut turf stacked against the outside. Some groups packed snow up against the walls, which sounds absurd until you know that a thick layer of snow is an excellent insulator. It traps pockets of air, and trapped air holds heat. Bit by bit, the wind ran out of places to get in. And the effort did not stop at the walls. At Sibudu, a rock shelter in South Africa, researchers found bedding made from sedges and rushes carried up from the river below, dating to 77,000 years ago. Not simply piled there, topped with the leaves of an aromatic camphor tree, the kind that contains chemicals which kill insects and their larvae. And starting a few thousand years later, the people living there burned the bedding on purpose, apparently to clear out pests before laying down fresh material. People were engineering their sleep long before our species left Africa. At Border Cave, grass bedding goes back at least 200,000 years. and a well-sealed shelter with a fire inside it creates a fresh problem, and a serious one. A fire has to be fed all winter, which means somebody has to keep walking back out into the cold over and over for months. You are bound to that shelter now. You cannot simply wander off to find food, which means the food has to already be there. Which brings us to the third weapon, and probably the deadliest. Here is a piece of winter that modern life has erased completely. In winter, the land stops producing food. Plants die back or go dormant. Berries vanish. Roots sit locked inside frozen ground. Animals have moved on, gone into hiding, or grown as thin and desperate as you are. For a hunter and gatherer, winter is not only cold. It is the season the earth itself quits feeding you. And that turns survival into arithmetic, which is the thought you had standing in the first snow. You have to gather enough during the warm months to carry an entire group through months when almost nothing new arrives. So people became very good at cheating time. The first method was drying. Slice meat thin, let it dry in sun or over low smoke, and you pull the water out of it. Without water, it cannot rot. Dried meat kept for months, and the smoke added a second layer of protection on top of the drying. A rack of drying meat in autumn was, in every practical sense, a group's insurance policy against starving in the last weeks of winter. The second method turned the enemy into a tool. Frozen ground works as a freezer. Dig a pit down into ground that stays frozen, pack it with meat from a good kill, and the cold keeps it edible for a remarkably long time. Think about the shape of that. The thing trying to starve you became the thing preserving the food that kept you alive. And the third was the most valuable of all, and it was not meat exactly. It was fat. When your body is burning enormous amounts of energy simply to stay warm, lean meat is not enough. Fat is the densest energy source available to a human being, and deep in winter it was worth more than almost anything else. People rendered animal fat down into something stable and storable. Then they combined it with dried meat into a dense ration that packed enormous calories into a small, portable form. In a season where every calorie was counted, fat was the difference between a group that reached spring and one that did not. So now, look at where your ancestors are standing. They are warm, they are sheltered, they are fed. 3 of winter's 4 weapons answered. And those 3 answers, taken together, have just sealed them inside a small dark space with the same handful of people for 16 hours a night for months. Here comes the 4th weapon. It is the one nobody thinks about because it does not attack the body at all. The darkness. The further north you go, the more the days shrink and the nights stretch. You might get a few usable hours of light, followed by 15 or 16 hours of cold blackness with nothing to do but wait. You cannot travel far. You cannot hunt in the dark. You are confined to a small space with the same faces, night after night after night. That kind of enclosure wears a person down in a way that cold and hunger never managed. And notice what does not help here. No coat fixes this. No mammoth bone wall fixes this. No pit of frozen meat fixes this. This is the one problem in the entire chain with no technological answer. So watch what they did with it instead. They filled it completely. The long night became the time for every task that did not need daylight or decent weather. Sitting near the fire, repairing tools, shaping fresh points, mending clothing for the rest of the season, twisting plant fiber into cord, carving. The dark was not wasted time. It was workshop time. The hours when a group got everything ready for the instant the weather broke, and it was more than labor. Around that fire, in the dark, is where people talked, where the old passed down what they knew to the young, where the same stories got told again and again until they held a group's entire memory and carried it into the next generation. An enormous share of what we now call human culture The myths and the songs and the shared knowledge was forged in exactly these conditions. We even have a measurement of it, which is remarkable in itself. In 2014, the anthropologist Polly Wiesner published a study of conversation among the Juhoansi of the Kalahari, drawn from decades of fieldwork. She compared 174 daytime and nighttime conversations. Daytime talk was practical, economic matters, gossip that regulated who owed what to whom. After dark, the subject matter swung hard. Night talk moved to stories, to singing, to dancing, to ritual. To people who were not present, to how the world works. Firelight changed what people were willing to say out loud, and that is the answer to the fourth weapon. It was not a tool. It was each other. Now read the whole chain backwards and look at what it built. The cold forced fitted, sewn clothing, and that is what let a tropical species leave the tropics. The scarcity of caves forced people to invent architecture. The gap in the food supply forced the invention of storage and preservation. And the long dark forced the thing we are least likely to call an invention at all. It forced culture. Nearly every technology that let our species spread into every climate on this planet was hammered out by people trying not to die in the cold. Winter did not test your ancestors. It assembled them. Which brings you back to the first snow. Somewhere this year, you will look out a window and see it coming down, and you will feel a small, ordinary irritation. The commute, the shoveling, the dark arriving in the afternoon. You will not feel what that person at the edge of camp felt. You will not run the arithmetic. You will never once stand in the first snowfall of the year and wonder, with your whole body, whether you stored enough to reach spring. And that is not because winter got gentler. It is because 100,000 winters worth of human beings froze and starved and sat pressed shoulder to shoulder in the dark, solving it one invention at a time. They did the arithmetic so many times that you will never have to do it once.